I still remember the very first sound of that fateful morning. The sharp clink of a metal spoon against a chipped porcelain plate, echoing in a kitchen as quiet as a funeral. The sky outside the window wasn't even fully lit, but the air inside the house was already cold enough to make me pull my thin jacket tighter, as if it could protect me from what was coming. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, silently watching my mother flip eggs in the skillet like she was doing something entirely ordinary. No good morning, no how did you sleep, just silence. A thick, suffocating silence that made even breathing feel like a disturbance. My father Harold sat across from me, eyes locked on his phone, thumb swiping with robotic precision. He didn't look up. I could almost hear each tap, louder than the words he was about to say. I knew something was coming. Women always know when their presence starts to feel like clutter in the place they once called home. "We think it's time you stood on your own 2 feet." My mother, Claire, finally spoke. Her voice was cold, detached, like she was announcing a policy change, not disowning her 38-year-old daughter. I stared at her, stunned. "Mom, I have a full-time job. I'm not asking for money. I'm just between leases. It's only 2 weeks." My father cut in without lifting his head. "You're almost 40, Sophia. You've had plenty of time to figure things out." I swallowed hard, not because of what they said, but how they said it, like I was a spoiled carton of milk. Like being unmarried, childless, and not successful on their terms made me unforgivable. "She still sleeps in her parents' basement like some failed college student," my younger sister Brooke's voice rang from the staircase. She wore a silk robe, latte in hand. "How embarrassing if the neighbors find out." I turned and looked at her, silently. She never liked me, but this time she didn't bother hiding the glee. That half smirk, half sneer made me want to hurl my coffee mug straight at the wall. My mother walked over, gently dragging something across the hardwood floor. It stopped right at my feet. A worn-out suitcase. The same one I used in college back in Denver. The handle was torn, the faux leather peeling, and the old owl sticker I slapped on it sophomore year was still barely hanging on. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My throat felt like it was packed with concrete. "It's not because we hate you," my dad said, trying to sound kind. "It's just time to face reality." My mother wiped her hands on a kitchen towel. 15 minutes. Pack what you need. The morning bus comes by at 7:30. Brooke crossed her arms, leaning on the stair rail. "Told them you'd take it badly." I said nothing. No begging, no tears. I stood, grabbed the suitcase without checking what was inside. All of my things, clothes, papers, memories. They had boxed them up and thrown them into the garage sometime when I wasn't looking. At the door, my mother called out, "Wait!" I turned. She tossed me an old gray knit hat, the one I made for her during my first winter break from the dorms. "Wear it. Stay warm. We're not monsters." I looked at the hat, held it in my hands, then gently placed it on the doorstep. "I know," I whispered. "That's what makes this hurt more." I walked away, didn't look back. The squeak of the old suitcase wheels scraping the sidewalk echoed in the early morning stillness, like the quiet weeping of years I had lived in silence, unseen. I sat on an old wooden bench at the Southport bus station, clutching my scuffed suitcase. My phone read 6:20. The air was still heavy with mist, and a sharp breeze slipped through my jacket, making my shoulders shiver. I had no idea where I was going. The only thing I knew for sure was that my own family had just cast me aside like a burden no one wanted. A delivery truck sped by, splashing water onto the edge of the sidewalk. I stood to dodge it, startled as my phone buzzed in my pocket. My heart seemed to buzz with it. It was a notification from the North Carolina Lottery app, something I downloaded a few weeks ago, just to play around after a lousy day at the community work center. I tapped the screen, ready to delete it like all the better luck next time messages I'd gotten before, but this one wasn't that. "Congratulations, your ticket matches all 6 numbers for drawing 1442, estimated prize $4.2 million. I froze. My eyes didn't believe the numbers on the screen. 11, 28, 34, 2, 217, 40. I remembered buying that ticket at the convenience store behind my old dorm during a quick stop for toiletries, a spur-of-the-moment thing, like throwing away $5 for 5 minutes of foolish hope. I dug into my wallet, hands shaking like I had a fever, pulling out the crumpled slip stained with coffee. I didn't need to read it twice. I remembered every number. I picked them myself. They weren't random, they were tied to memories no one else would understand. The day I got my master's degree, my first dorm room number, the day my grandfather passed. I sank back down onto the bench. I didn't laugh, didn't speak. The only thing in my head was a single sentence. Don't call them. For 38 years, I had chosen forgiveness. I had swallowed every condescending remark from Brooke, every cold glance from my parents. Every time they needed something, I showed up. Every time I needed them, they turned away. I used to think, if I ever had money, I'd buy Mom that SUV she always dreamed of. I'd pay off Dad's credit card debt. I'd set up a scholarship fund for Brooke's twins, the same kids I babysat every summer because their mom needed a break. That thought lasted exactly 3 seconds. Reality slapped me harder than the wind slicing through the bus station. They had tossed me out without a hug, without a single apology. They weren't worth saving. I opened my banking app and initiated a verify identity hold on the lottery winnings, enough to conceal all transaction details for now. Then I booked a modest hotel near the outskirts of Charlotte, quiet, clean, a luxury I hadn't dared spend on myself in over a year. That evening, I sank into a hot bath, a cup of chamomile tea in hand. No banging on the bathroom door, no voices shouting my name, just water and the sound of my own heart slowing for the first time in years. When my phone buzzed, I knew it was Brooke, a short message. Mom says you left a musty smell in the guest room. Next time, please clean up better. I read it again and again, unsure if I was angry or just tired. I deleted it silently, no reply. When I opened my suitcase to change into pajamas, I stopped cold. Beneath the old clothes was the knit hat my mother had thrown at me on my way out, the one I'd left on the doorstep. There it was. Quiet, still clinging to me somehow. I picked it up. The yarn had faded, the edge unraveling. I had no idea who slipped it into my suitcase. Maybe Mom, maybe Brooke, maybe just an accident. I didn't cry. I didn't throw it away. I folded it neatly and tucked it into the bottom corner of the suitcase, not out of love, but to remind myself exactly why I would never return to that place. Tomorrow, I would start over. A life without them. A life where every decision, big or small, would be mine to make. 3 days after receiving official confirmation from the North Carolina Lottery Commission, I was sitting in the office of a financial firm on the 12th floor of an unmarked building in the south end of Charlotte. The only person who knew I was there was me. The financial advisor, Marissa, looked to be in her mid-30s. She spoke clearly and never asked unnecessary questions. She didn't flinch when I asked to set up an anonymous investment fund. Nor did she act curious when I said, I want everything under an independent LLC, no relatives, no co-owners, no one but me. Marissa gave a professional nod. I've seen cases like this before, she said. Everyone has their reasons to protect themselves. And you, Sophia, clearly know what you're doing. I smiled faintly. That sounded like confirmation. In all 38 years of my life, no one had ever told me I knew what I was doing. They only saw me as someone who'd missed her chance, someone they needed to help, always with that smug pity. Within a week, I had rented a small apartment in the Dilworth area, quiet, full of maple trees, and not a single soul around who knew me. The apartment had just 2 rooms, a simple bedroom and a living room with a large window overlooking an artificial lake. I ordered everything online, the bed, armchair, bookshelf, coffee maker. Each item was my own choice, Not Mom's taste, not Brooke's suggestions. I didn't tell anyone my new address. I didn't post anything online. I turned off my old phone and permanently disabled it. I bought a new number, not linked to any social media accounts. The old Sophia, the sweet girl always ready to clean up, babysit, lend money, and never ask for it back, had been buried back at the Southport bus station. I was learning the power of intentional silence. Every morning, I walked around the lake, listening to finance podcasts. Every night, I wrote in my journal, "No one owes me gratitude, but I owe no one loyalty if they never valued it." Marisa helped me allocate the investment fund. One portion went into government bonds, another into real estate under the company's name, and the rest into a bank account in Colorado, a state known for strong asset privacy laws. She asked, "Do you want to name a beneficiary, just in case something happens?" I replied plainly, "No." She looked up, but said nothing more. That silence was the reason I trusted her. A month later, with finances in place, I quietly returned to Raleigh on a rainy day. No one knew I was there. I rented a car, wore dark sunglasses, and a loose coat. I didn't look like a brand new lottery millionaire, just a tired woman visiting a place that no longer felt like home. I didn't stop by my old street or my parents' house. I only went to see a lawyer named Whitman, who used to handle property documents for families in my old neighborhood. With a special fee, he helped me check the ownership status of 412 South Hawthorne. The house they kicked me out of with nothing but an old suitcase. "It's still under Harold and Claire Miller's names," he said, peering at the screen. "However, the mortgage is nearly in default." I sat still, lips pressed slightly. If I wanted to buy it back through a third party, would that be legal? Whitman gave a soft laugh. "You'd have full rights, as long as the seller agrees, or if the bank forecloses. It's first come, first served." I left my business card, the legal identity of my LLC, and walked out without looking back. That night, back in Charlotte, I sat by the window watching the rain streak down the glass. I thought of all those dinners I'd cleaned up alone. The holidays where I was the one cooking while Brooke posted selfies. I thought about what my dad said when I got into grad school. "That's fine, but why didn't you study something that makes more money?" And I remembered my mother's eyes the morning they shoved the suitcase toward me, like I had never really belonged in that family. I took a sip of chamomile tea and quietly thought, if they want to forget who I am, I'll make sure they never can. I never expected it all to begin with such a simple question. "Are you related to Mr. Charles Miller?" It came from a young bank employee, Reed, a polite but slightly impatient guy with wavy blonde hair, when I came to open a secondary investment account at the old Westline branch, where my family had banked for decades. I nodded slowly. He was my grandfather. Passed away in 2008. Reed looked down at his screen. "I'm only asking because your LLC's name matches a trust account he established before his death, the Charles E. Miller Family Trust." Then he glanced up and blinked. "Probably just a coincidence." I kept my tone calm. "That account is still active?" "Yes, but the list of beneficiaries was updated back in 2015. Only 2 names currently have access." I leaned in slightly. "Can I see the list?" He shook his head. "Sorry, that information is private, unless you're on the list or have proper authorization." That last sentence slid across my shoulders like a cold blade. I didn't need to ask whose names were listed. Brooke and my father, maybe even my mother. But not me. After that meeting, I didn't head straight home. I drove straight to my aunt's house, Aunt Evelyn, my father's older sister. The only person in the family who had ever treated me like a person, not some defective knockoff of Brooke. Her house sat in a northern suburb of Chapel Hill, wrapped in vines and wildflowers. I stopped at the gate just as the clock struck 4 p.m., hesitating for a few seconds before knocking on the door. Aunt Evelyn opened it wearing a flower-dusted apron, her eyes lighting up the moment she saw me. "Sophia? Oh my goodness! Are you okay?" I didn't even get a word out before she pulled me inside and nudged the door shut with her hip, as if afraid I might change my mind. We sat in her kitchen, the scent of baking apple pie drifting through the air. I gave her the short version of being kicked out, leaving out the lottery win and my current plans. But when I mentioned Grandpa and the trust, her expression froze. "How long have you known about that?" she asked. "A bank clerk let it slip. I thought my name was supposed to be on it." Aunt Evelyn got up, unnervingly silent. After a few moments, she returned, holding a darkened wooden box. She placed it on the table like it was sacred. "You know," she said, "before he passed, your grandfather wrote a letter, addressed to your father, but your mother held on to it." I clenched my hands in my lap, and then what happened? She said there was no point keeping sentimental nonsense. Told me to burn it, but I couldn't. She opened the box and pulled out a thin yellow envelope, the corners slightly curled. On it was a bold, familiar script. "To my brightest granddaughter, Sophia." I took a deep breath, then opened it. The paper had yellowed, but the writing was still clear. "Sophia is the one with the strongest spirit. She sees what others avoid. I leave most of my estate to her, not because she needs it, but because she'll value it. I hope that when she reads this, she still believes in herself." I set the letter down, my body trembling as if thawing from ice. "I had no idea." Aunt Evelyn sighed. "Because they didn't want you to know. They think you're too different, too free, too hard to control, and so they erased you from the inheritance map." That sentence sat heavy in the air. I had always tried to earn their approval, their recognition, but the truth was they had chosen to abandon me long ago, quietly, systematically, like a strategy. I tucked the letter into my coat pocket and stood up. "I won't seek revenge," I said softly. And Evelyn watched me, waiting. "But I will make sure they remember. I am part of this story, no matter how hard they try to bury it." 2 weeks after my meeting with Aunt Evelyn, I returned to Attorney Whitman's office with a decision that had fully ripened. He looked at me, slightly surprised, as I placed a thick stack of meticulously prepared documents on his desk. On top was a trustee purchase agreement from a real estate company named Willowgate Holdings, LLC, the very company I owned, registered in Delaware to protect my identity. "Shall we proceed?" I asked, my voice as steady as a windless lake. Whitman nodded. "I've been in contact with the bank. The property at 412 South Hawthorne is on the brink of foreclosure. The loan's been delinquent for over 4 months. The owners haven't responded to any of the notices." I nodded back. "I want to buy the house the moment the bank puts it up for auction, or, if possible, negotiate a direct purchase beforehand." He gave a slow, knowing smile. "Their silence is your greatest asset right now." Less than a month later, when the bank hosted a closed-door transfer for strategic investors, Willowgate Holdings appeared as a brand new player. No one there knew that I was once the woman kicked out of that very house, tossed with nothing but a worn suitcase and a silent goodbye. The entire process was completed within 5 business days. The purchase price came in nearly $150,000 below market value, thanks to the owner's poor financial standing and the looming threat of public auction. I signed the deed transfer in a single, firm stroke, along with one instruction: the buyer's identity must remain confidential. When Whitman asked, "Would you like your real name listed on the deed?" I smiled. "No. I want them to receive the notice from a name they never thought would return." 17 days later, Brooke called me. She used an old number I'd temporarily kept active for banking contacts. I didn't answer. Then a text came through. "Do you know what's going on? Someone sent us an eviction warning." Mom nearly fainted. Minutes later, a panicked voicemail from my mother. "Sophia? Is that you? If you know who's doing this, please make them stop." I didn't respond. I just sat in my quiet apartment, sipping a cup of hot lemon tea, eyes resting on the trees outside turning amber with early fall. That very house, the one where I was once labeled a burden, was now mine. But I hadn't bought it to live in. I bought it to reclaim the right to choose. The day the official eviction notice was sent, I requested it be delivered via certified mail with signature confirmation. The recipient was Harold Miller, my father. I could almost picture his face as he read the company name, Willowgate Holdings, current owner. I bet he Googled it in a panic, cursing under his breath, wondering how his useless daughter could possibly be involved. I didn't care. I didn't need them to believe in me. I only needed the law to be on my side. 10 days later, a handwritten letter arrived at the company office. No return address, but I recognized the trembling handwriting instantly. Sophia, if you're reading this, please don't do this to your family. I know you're angry, I understand, but this is still your home. Come back, let's talk, before it's too late. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't tear it, I didn't reply, because what they were trying to protect wasn't love. It was control, and for the first time in my life, I was the one behind the wheel. On the day the eviction order took effect, I hired a legal service to handle the scene. They followed proper procedure, posted the notice, documented the deadline, recorded everything. I wasn't there. I didn't need to see them cling to what they once called heritage. I only asked the delivery staff to leave a small envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a copy of the letter my grandfather had once written to me, along with a note in my handwriting. This isn't revenge. This is reclaiming what was promised to me. That evening, I sat in my quiet apartment, watching footage of the old house through surveillance cameras. The gray wooden door opened. My mother stood frozen in the yard, clutching a family photo frame, while Brooke screamed into her phone as if one more call could buy her time. I turned off the screen. It was time they knew what it felt like to be pushed out of the place they once called home. I knew things wouldn't end after the eviction order was enforced. My family had never accepted defeat, especially not in front of someone they once treated as invisible. And the first to break the silence was Brooke. On a Monday morning, I got a message from Marissa, my financial advisor. Sophia, did you turn on the TV? Channel 7, this morning's segment, I think you should watch. I turned on the TV, changed the channel, and nearly dropped the remote at what I saw. Brooke. In a pale floral dress, soft wavy curls, sitting right in the middle of a brightly lit studio couch. Beneath her was a headline, "Lottery-winning sister abandons family, the truth behind the controversial fallout." I leaned back in my chair, gripping my coffee mug. Brooke smiled sweetly, brushing away a fake tear from her cheek. "We tried our best," she said, voice soft as cotton. Sophia was always a private person, but after she won the lottery, everything changed. She moved away, cut off contact, didn't say a word. It was truly heartbreaking. The host tilted her head sympathetically. "So, she didn't share anything with the family?" Brooke nodded. "Not a single dollar. No explanation. My mom cried through the night. She hired lawyers to evict our mother from the house that's been home to 3 generations. We didn't do anything wrong, did we?" I closed my eyes. My sister's fake face was now nationwide, while the real story had been twisted beyond recognition. They were turning me into some cold, ungrateful, greedy monster, and if I stayed silent, people would believe it. I had no choice. That evening, I visited an old friend, Henry, a former audio technician for the local radio station, a discreet, honest man who knew how to handle sensitive material. I handed him a USB I had kept all this time. Inside was a recording of a conversation between my parents, captured from a small recording device embedded in a return package they once sent to my company. My mother's voice came through loud and clear. "If she wins this case, we lose everything. Harold, you have to make her back off. Make her believe she's not worthy." And my father's voice. "I removed her name from the trust ages ago. That girl has nothing to hold on to. She doesn't belong to this legacy." Henry listened and nodded. "That's heavy. But what do you want to do with it?" I pressed my lips together. "I don't want revenge. I just want the truth to be heard." On Friday morning, when Brooke appeared on a live panel segment on Charlotte Newsline, Henry was ready. All I had to do was send 2 words: play it. Exactly 3 minutes into Brooke's tearful tale, the broadcast was interrupted. The screen flickered. The audio shifted. Then a woman's voice came on, not the host, not Brooke. It was my mother. If she wins, we lose everything. Then a man's firm voice followed. I removed her name from the trust ages ago. The entire studio froze. Brooke's mouth hung open, her face pale. The host looked completely lost. The station cut to emergency commercials in under 10 seconds. But the internet doesn't move that fast. The audio was already being streamed on dozens of platforms, one of which posted a version under a channel called Justice Sounds. The clip gained over 2 million views in just 24 hours, titled "Family Lies on National TV, Exposed by Their Own Voices." The hashtag Justice for Sophia began spreading. People who had been victims of toxic families resonated, shared, and commented. The internet no longer believed the cruel sister's story. They saw a woman who had once been erased now rise to tell exactly what had happened. A few days later, the TV station released an apology for a technical oversight. Brooke disappeared from the media. An anonymous account leaked emails revealing my family had hired a PR firm to manage their image. That effort had now turned to ashes. As for me, I didn't appear. I gave no interviews. I didn't write an open letter. I let their true voices drag them down. I stayed in the shadows, quietly, but more powerful than ever. Because I knew, in this life, sometimes truth doesn't have to scream to be heard. It just needs to be set free. I never imagined I'd one day stand in a courtroom facing the very people who gave me life. But there comes a point when, if you don't stand up for the truth, you'll be buried beneath the weight of someone else's lies. I filed a lawsuit against my parents, Harold and Claire, and my sister Brooke, with 3 clear charges: defamation through media, misappropriation of personal assets, and intentional nullification of my rightful inheritance from the trust fund my grandfather left behind. My attorney, Caitlin Monroe, a sharp and composed woman in her 40s, looked me straight in the eye during our very first consultation and said, "This isn't a money fight. This is a battle for your name, and I'm not letting them rewrite your life with a cheap draft." The trial was held at Wake County Courthouse on a gray winter day. I wore a dark navy blazer, no jewelry, no lipstick. I didn't need to look right. I just needed to show up as myself, the person they tried to erase. Across the aisle, Brooke entered with eyes cold as steel, flanked by my parents, faces I once knew intimately, now just the hollow shells of what used to be called family. Their attorney started with what I'd expected. Sophia has emotional instability. She developed delusions of grandeur after winning the lottery. This lawsuit stems from bitterness over emotional neglect. I didn't look at them. I focused on the jury. And I didn't see sympathy in their eyes. I saw doubt. Doubt in the smoothness of those rehearsed lies. Caitlin rose to speak, standing straight like a drawn arrow. "We are not here to claim back money. We are here to prove one thing. Honor is not something you toss out the door with a suitcase." Then she presented the evidence. Financial records from the bank showing that my father, acting as my legal guardian, had been quietly siphoning funds from our joint account from when I was 17 until I turned 32. The total exceeded $42,000. A certified copy of my grandfather's original will, bearing a notarized signature, naming me as the primary beneficiary, before it was altered just months after his death. An audio recording of a conversation between my parents where they admitted to removing me from everything because I was too hard to control. And finally, a hidden camera video embedded in a fake media invitation, capturing Brooke and my mother planning to manipulate their TV appearance to steer public opinion. The room went silent when the video played the line from my mother. "As long as people see her as the betrayer, then whatever the truth is, it won't matter." A woman on the jury, about 50, placed her hand on her chest and shook her head. I didn't need anything else. After 2 days of arguments, the court ruled. The defendants must issue a public apology on the same television program where they smeared my name. They must repay all the funds they had taken, including interest accrued. And I was recognized as the sole legal heir of the Charles E. Miller Trust. When the judge turned to me and asked, "Miss Sophia, would you like to make a final statement before we close?" I stood up and looked directly at the 3 people who once shared my blood. My voice was steady. I don't need an apology. Because an apology only matters when it comes with genuine remorse. I'm not standing here to force anyone to bow. I'm standing here to remind the world the truth cannot be buried, no matter how many layers of concrete you pour over it. I pulled a crumpled piece of paper from my pocket, a copy of the letter my grandfather wrote me. Someone once believed I was worthy, and today I'm simply keeping a promise to that person. I walked out of that courthouse in the faint afternoon sun. The wind slipped through my collar, but my heart had never felt warmer. I was no longer the girl who had been pushed out of her home with a torn suitcase. I was Sophia, and this time I walked away with my honor fully intact. I returned to the house at 412 South Hawthorne on a late autumn afternoon, just as the red trees lining the sidewalk began to shed their leaves. The house was empty. The windows were shut, the curtains gone. The for sale sign on the front lawn, posted by the real estate agency, had tilted sideways in the wind, one corner buried deep in the ground. I hadn't planned on coming back, but something compelled me to walk through it one last time. Not to reclaim anything, but to look at the memories once abandoned. The property manager handed me the key and asked, "Would you like to keep anything?" Most of the previous owner's belongings have already been cleared. I simply replied, "I'll take a look, thank you." Inside the house, there was a strange emptiness. The familiar wooden floors, the white tile kitchen, the staircase with one broken step, all still there, but the scent of cinnamon from my mother's baking was gone, and so were the early morning slipper sounds from my father. Every sound that once belonged to this place had been drained, as if the house itself was waiting for a final goodbye. I slowly walked up to the second floor, to what used to be my room. The small one at the end of the hallway, once painted pastel blue by my mother when I was in middle school. When they kicked me out, I wasn't allowed to take anything but a torn suitcase. The rest, photos, journals, sketchbooks, the things I loved, had been boxed and shoved into the garage. What happened to them after that, I never knew. I opened the door, empty, but near the built-in closet, a small corner hadn't shut completely. I knelt down and tapped lightly. My hand brushed against something soft and flat. A plastic box filled with old letters and photos labeled in purple ink. "Sophia, do not throw away." I sat down on the floor. Inside were a few faded photographs, a high school wristband, and a birthday card from when I was 10. My mother's handwriting was still clear. "To the brightest light in our home. Even if you're different, I've always believed you'll do something big. Love, Mom." I held the card, unsure whether to laugh or cry. My mother, the same woman who later called me a burden, a disappointment, had once written those words. Or maybe they were just obligatory sentiments from a mother on her daughter's birthday. I wasn't looking for an answer. I quietly placed the card back in the box and stood up. The past is a shadow. If we keep turning around to face it, we'll never see the light ahead. A few weeks later, I mailed that birthday card to a friend of mine, an installation artist in New Orleans. He once told me, "A memory doesn't need to be beautiful, it just needs to be true." Together, we turned that card, along with the actual suitcase I was thrown out with, into an art piece titled Inheritance. It was displayed at a contemporary art exhibit themed Family and Silence. Inside the open suitcase was the glass-pressed birthday card, surrounded by torn fabric scraps and small notes capturing hurtful phrases I'd once heard. "Why can't you be more like your sister? You need to be more realistic. This family doesn't have space for someone useless." Visitors lingered long at that display. Some cried. One woman, maybe in her 50s, whispered to her friend, "I feel like this is my story." I stood in the corner of the room, anonymous. I didn't need to be recognized. I just needed the truth to be seen. Something I had waited a lifetime for. Today I live in Asheville, a quiet town nestled among mountains and lakes. I founded a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name, the Charles Miller Grant, dedicated to students who were victims of emotional abuse within their families. I didn't use my own name. I don't need credit. I just want to make sure my pain wasn't wasted. One morning, while watering the flowers, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but my daughter, Lila, just received a scholarship from the Charles Fund. I just wanted to say thank you. You've changed her life." I didn't respond right away. I just looked out over the blooming field behind my porch. In that moment, I knew I had stepped out of the darkness. I didn't need to go back and demand justice. I rebuilt my life from the broken pieces others tried to discard. And this time, I didn't ask for a place to stand. I created one for myself. Sophia's story reminds us that sometimes, in order to find ourselves, we must walk away from those who once called themselves family. When her dignity was denied and the truth distorted, she didn't choose revenge through hatred, but through wisdom, calm, and unwavering resolve. Sophia didn't just reclaim her lost honor, she turned pain into purpose and built a life she could truly call her own. In the real world, it's a powerful reminder. You have the right to say enough and start writing your story on your own terms. What do you think about Sophia's journey? What would you have done in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, heartfelt family stories.